If you've ever had to charge an electric vehicle while you're away from home, then you know that most charging stations are somewhere near retail and or restaurants. And if you do it a lot, you're going to choose to charge your car in the place that is near where you want to go eat or shop. My guest today is Lane Chaplin with Hyperfuel. Hyperfuel is creating a network of fast charging stations in the US, and Lane is going to tell me about their unique approach, how they incentivize people to shop at local retailers and restaurants while they're charging their EVs. You're listening to Where We Buy. It's the show where we talk with retail experts and we visit the places where we buy. My name is James Cook. I research retail and real estate for JLL. I was in Montreal recently and I spent some time digging into the local food scene as a part of a research project that I'm working on. And I did some interviews with local restaurateurs, made a visit to the Time Out Market food hall. I filmed those interviews and the food that we ate at the food hall and have been posting them on LinkedIn. You can check them out. Go to LinkedIn, search for James Cook JLL, and in my profile, you can see my past video posts, and you can also follow or connect with me to see future posts. Live from New York, it's Where We Buy. Today, we are recording live from the JLL booth at ICSC New York. My guest today is Lane Chaplin with Hyperfuel. Welcome, Lane.
Thank you so much for having me in the sea of people that we have currently here at ICSC.
I know.
It's great to see.
And we have to sit here and pretend like none of it's going on and we're just having a normal conversation. So Lane, tell us a little bit about your history.
Yeah, sure. So I actually started out in engineering, made my way to law, went into law school, did about my third internship out of 6 and said, maybe I want to go a different route. Eventually found my way into retail real estate. Started out my career at LA Fitness as director of real estate, working under somebody who the industry is probably very familiar with, Bill Horner, wonderful person. And then from there, I ended up going on to Tesla. And at Tesla, I started out as basically the real estate manager for the Southwest. So, doing things like collision centers, sales service and delivery centers. Eventually, my territory expanded a little bit to Texas. And so I started doing a bunch of industrial ancillary uses for Gigafactory Austin. During that time, I was tasked with a project that's going to be coming up in West Hollywood, the Tesla Diner, that I did. And from that, I ended up meeting the charging team and got to be, close with them. And eventually they asked me to come on and lead real estate for them for North America. And now I'm currently at Hyperfuel, where I'm a vice president of network development and real estate.
So you took what you learned about retail real estate, and then also EV charging, took that to Hyperfuel. So how do you describe what Hyperfuel does?
Yeah, so Hyperfuel at its core, we do charging, right? We're a level 4 only charging company, which means we're only doing 600 kilowatt hours for speed. But we also have other elements that we do. And one of the things that really persuaded me to come to the company and devote a lot of time to it is what we have called the connected retail experience. And all of the EV charging companies that are out there, they can all say that they can drive traffic to your parking lots, basically bring people to your site, as the nomenclature is usually used. It's entirely true. Like, they can bring traffic to your site. But what they can't say is that they really do anything overtly to actually incentivize people to get out of their cars, turn off, the video apps in their phone and come to the stores and shop. And one of the things that we look to solve for is doing just that.
How do you get somebody out of the car?
Yeah, so probably helpful for that is just giving a little bit of background of some of the people in my company. So one of those is somebody who has a lot of experience in Microsoft, formerly led the Bing search engine. He went on to develop this thing called Retailer IQ, which you might be familiar with if you've ever been to one of the drugstores and get your very long receipt at the end of the day. But we've got a lot of different things, a lot of different elements into our company that basically seek to incentivize people on a personalized basis, which is very important, on a personalized basis to come out of their vehicles and actually come to the schools and shop.
Got it. So let's say I charge at Hyperfuel, so I'm going to be using the Hyperfuel app.
That's right.
And while I'm using it, I'm going to get hey, James, we know you love an Americano every morning. You should get a 10% discount if you go get one right now, something like that.
The key that you said there is that we know.
Okay.
Because it's personalized, right?
Yeah.
Like the vision overall for the company is to provide very high speed charging, but also do it in a way that brings value to the landlords and the retailers alike. I mean, you touched on it already. Like part of my background and the thing that's very near and dear to me is, the whole ICS of where we're at now, the whole retail element to that. It's like, how can we reward not only the customer, but the landowner, the landlord, the tenant, everybody in that ecosystem, and make it to where our goals are completely aligned at the end of the day. Our business model is built off of utilization. So in other words, if somebody's not using the site, we're not getting what we need, and the landlord's not getting what they need, and it just creates a very good synergy. And that was very important to us at our core to make sure that was completely aligned.
You would be partnering with a landlord. Well, tell me a little bit more about what that partnership looks like. You approach a landlord and say, what do you say? How does it work?
Yeah, I mean, well, at the end of the day, we are looking to basically just use your parking spaces. I mean, there's an agreement that gets into place with other terms, obviously, but at its core, it's, can we just use these parking spaces and get that way through a license agreement? And if we are, then we're able to basically cut the landlord in on some of what that site is generating.
I see. So they'll get a percentage of the fees from the EV charging, but then who's doing the advertising? I guess it would be individual retailers at that center.
Individual retailers.
Okay.
Yeah, and we've partnered with some I'm not allowed to disclose, but we're partnering with them in a major way to where, we're able to trying to pick and choose what I'm able to say and what I'm not. But suffice it to say that we're able to very particularly hone in on that particular customer and make sure that they're getting what they need in order to return to that store more frequently than they would otherwise.
Gotcha. So I've got an app to use, for example, the Tesla charging stations. So I would get an app. Would I get the Hyperfuel app?
You would.
Okay.
Yeah, and pretty important to what we do, the app is actually a digital wallet at the same time. So that's important because there are loyalty rewards programs that even if we don't have an agreement with a certain retailer, if they have a retail rewards program, they're able to attach it to the wallet and be able to get rewards and incentives not only from them, but from Hyperfuel as well.
Now, I know there's a lot of charging networks out there. Do I necessarily need the Hyperfuel app to charge at a Hyperfuel charger? Like, would you set
For our
up
chargers, we would prefer it.
Yeah.
Because you basically miss out on so much if you don't, but certain government regulations in certain states are going to require us to do at point of sale pay as well. And so there will be an opportunity for that too.
Okay. So, I mean, do you have big growth plans?
We have really big growth plans. So we are aggressively seeking sites right now in key markets. We are looking to get to 150 locations by the end of next year. And then by the end of 2026, it's pretty lofty, but we're still determined to get it. It's going to be 1,000.
1,000.
Sites. Yeah. It's 1,000 independent sites, not chargers.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
In what's the region?
So right now we're currently looking in California, all of California, Phoenix Metro, Texas, the big, 4 core markets, Atlanta, Georgia, and New York City.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. So
then very soon after that, we'll be expanding out to others. I'm not at liberty to say where just yet, but there's already ones that you probably could guess and get it right 100% of the time.
So if there's a landlord that's looking to drive some new EV traffic to their center, and they reach out to you or you reach out to them, what are you looking at? What makes for a good site? I mean, obviously you need the parking spaces, but there's got to be other stuff beyond that.
Yeah, for us, it has a lot to do with obviously EV registrations. You got to have EVs in the market, right? High traffic counts are also very key, right? Because you want to drive that volume constantly. But what's really important to us too are the amenities, right? The amenities are extremely important because, as you're probably finding out as a new EV owner, and me as I've been an EV owner now for a bit, like whenever I go to charge, part of what that determination process is what can I do? What's my one more thing, right? And so if I know that I can go, an extra 5 miles and bypass this particular charger, but I can go and knock out my Whole Foods run, I'm going to pick that, right? Even though it's a little more out of the way. So that's really key to the whole process.
100%. I was just talking to a friend today, and I said, hey, I'm doing a road trip. It's my first time with an EV. How do I plan for that? And he said, I plan it based on the amenities around the charger. That's exactly what he said.
That's 100%. Yeah.
I was like, well, that makes sense. I don't want to be sitting in some boring parking lot for, whatever, half an hour, 45 minutes.
That's right. Yeah.
Are these complicated deals? I mean, are you spending a lot of time on each individual one of these?
No, in fact, I think one of the things that makes us unique in this space is that, me coming out of the retail real estate space and, in a more traditional sense, I recognize that we are an ancillary use. We are not a primary use. And so we don't want to waste the landlord's time negotiating these things to no end. So we actually have a very friendly agreement that we've tailored to the landlord. And to answer your question in a short way, no, these are not very complex. Essentially, license deals that allow us to be very nimble in getting this network built.
And it depends on the market, but some markets, landlords are really nervous about parking. Sometimes, and tenants have parking in their lease. Well, oftentimes they do. So is that a problem? Losing, parking spaces are too tight for this to work?
It all depends on the project, and it all depends on the municipality and even the state. Like, does the state have certain laws? I know certain states, they actually count the parking ratios for EV charging at 2-to-1 instead of 1-to-1. Most now actually do it 1-to-1. And parking is always very sensitive. And one of the things that we like to do is we don't want to be like right next to the front door of your very high traffic grocery, right? Or your, Target or whoever it is. We want to be on the ancillary kind of peripheral parking that isn't as heavily used, isn't as heavily contentious, and just allows for a much better synergy for everybody involved, right? To the point we made earlier with being EV owners, if I'm going to go to that Whole Foods and I'm going to charge, it's not going to bother me that much if I just have to walk a few extra parking spaces than I would have normally if I wasn't charging. And so all those things are kind of taken into consideration.
And you mentioned before 600 kilowatts. What's typical? A lot less than that, right?
Yeah, a lot of the competitors you're seeing a lot more 400s in the market now, but more generally, I think you see around the country probably 250. There's some that are 350. It's probably important too, just kind of like, a lot of people don't understand the leveling system. So you got level 1, which is nobody basically does anymore. You got level 2, which are basically your home wall chargers, right? Really good for residential and, hoteliers, that kind of thing. And then you have level 3, which is what most of the industry's at right now. And basically anytime you get over 350 kilowatt hours, you're in level 4 territory. And so that's what we're doing, and we're only doing that.
Are there many cars that can handle that many kilowatts?
Yeah, it's not a matter of can it handle it in the fact that it wouldn't charge if it was too much. It's more so like how fast will it charge.
I see.
So it's all limited on the battery, or not all, but a lot of it has to do with the battery technology. And that's increasing. I mean, the Cybertruck came out, it's got an 800 volt platform. A couple more offerings in the market that have the higher ones. So as you see the battery technology increase and you see the charging technology increase, I really think that there's going to be this moment where probably around 600 and 800 to where you're going to see we call it internally, affectionately, the 4K moment. So whenever you've seen a TV that's 1080p versus a 4K, it's like, whoa, I can tell a pretty big difference there. Put up a 4K next to an 8K side by side, you're like squinting at little pixels in the background, say, yeah, I kind of noticed that tree looks a little different. So we think the same thing's basically going to happen for a long period of time in the EV charging industry. It's going to plateau for a little bit.
I see. Now, when you get up to 600 kilowatts, does that mean it's faster to charge the car as well?
Depending on the battery technology.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if the car has the right kind of battery, what would be a charge up length of time that, in the future we can expect?
I mean, it could be if you pair a 600 with an 800, you're looking at roughly about a 15-minute charge.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
The problem is whenever, like, I'm sure you've experienced this already, but like you start charging from 0 or close to 0 to 80, it's like, whoa, that was pretty quick. Then you get to 80 to 100 and it's like, what did that slow down so much? It's very similar to a shopping center parking lot, right? Like you go to a parking lot, there's nobody in there, it's late at night. It's like, oh, it's so easy to find a parking spot. If there's a lot of people in the parking lot, it's going to take you a little bit to drive around and try to find that space. And very similar with electrons. Once it gets past, like you're basically, those electrons are trying to find out where to park.
That was a good metaphor. I was like, parking lot. And I was like, oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, okay, that makes perfect sense. That's great. I'm sure you have to explain this stuff all the time. That's got to be like one of the hurdles, right? Is because people don't always know about all this stuff.
It is. That's one of the challenges for sure. I think one of the other challenges is that, the EV charging industry is fairly young as a whole, but it's been around for a bit. A lot of landlords back in the day took chances on some others with the promise that it would really drive up sales in their shopping centers. And they didn't see that, right? A lot of them, I hear that feedback all the time. They just didn't see it. And so they're a little more apprehensive, but there's a lot of reasons that you don't see it, right? Speed is a big reason for that. It's very similar to like if you go to your refrigerator, right, and you want a full cup of ice, but you got a very slow ice dispenser where it's like 1 cube, 10 seconds later you get 2. Eventually you're going to do a calculation in your brain saying, okay, what's more important to me, these ice cubes or my time? And in EV charging, you're basically only paid on the electrons, the ice cubes that get into that cup, not how long you stand at the fridge. And so for us, it's like, you want people to be repeat customers, you want to have a great experience, and you want to have something that incentivizes them to come back, not only to your chargers, but to the stores and the amenities that you're in front of. And the faster you keep that speed, and you're not going down to like the level 2s even, which some are doing, you're able to keep that momentum going.
How far along are we in the U.S. in terms of overall infrastructure for EV charging?
Oh, there's a ton.
Ways to go, you're saying?
A ton. So we think by the year 2050, there needs to be about 150 times more EV charging based on what... So the industry itself, right, it's fairly new, but it's not at the same time. Like I mentioned, for most businesses, 2 very key inflection points, or industries, I should say, 5% and 20%, right? EV charging's now on new car sales at 7%, or not EV charging, I should say, EV vehicle sales are at 7%. So admit that first inflection point. Once you get to 20, it just kind of starts steaming, right? And so a lot of these states, California, as you know, I mean, very densely EV populated. They're at 24.3 in the latest quarter's reporting of new car sales overall for EV in California. More interestingly than that, Colorado actually bypassed them this past quarter, not in volume, but in percentage of new vehicle sales at 25.3. So that's just kind of like speaking to the overall trend in the industry and how it's catching more steam. It'll be interesting to see how it all plays out, but this is here. It's here to stay. And it's like, what do we do with this now? Like, how do we make this to where, it's not just like, oh, can I have some spaces in your lot and we're just going to make our money and then go home? Like, how can there be more of a synergy with retail real estate in particular and what we do? Because there is one. There's naturally a synergy there.
So you envision your best customer is going to be somebody who regularly visits a center to charge because that center has whatever amenities they like. You mentioned Whole Foods, but whatever, that place that they like to go to every week. So they're knocking that out. So it's not going to be like the road tripper. It's going to be like a regular visitor.
For the sites we're doing in particular, yeah, it's going to be a lot more of that dense urban kind of commuting, back and forth to work, maybe going out to shop, wanting to knock out 2 birds with 1 stone type shopper.
And do you find that a lot of those urban EV owners, they're not able to charge at home as much, or how does that work?
It depends, right? Like different people, they use home charging. I use home charging. I think it's a great supplement to what you want to do. But whenever you get into these more dense urban areas, especially where you have a lot of apartments where this hasn't really, flourished, and even if it has, it's like you got 40 chargers for, 400 apartments kind of thing. So that is part of it. There's interesting data so right now we're at a stage where energy is less expensive at night, right? So think about it like this: as the the EV vehicles increase, right? The sales increase, and it becomes more adopted in the market, and people are charging at home more, and it's straining the grid more and more. And it's already happened in different countries, but that's going to invert at some point where the energy is going to be more expensive at night. So if you get to that point, like, what do you do, right? Like, you can either just say, okay, I'm at a station in life where I can absorb that cost, or I can just do it on my Costco run tomorrow, or whatever the retailer is tomorrow, and get your charging done then.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I'd never thought about that. But of course, if we're going to have critical mass with EVs, there's going to be a lot more demand on that grid in the nighttime. Oh, that's interesting. So any other thoughts or predictions for the future of electric vehicles or the EV infrastructure?
Yeah, like I mentioned, I mean, it's here to stay. It's like It's all a matter of what we're going to do with it, right? I definitely just continue to see. I mean, you have I was reading announcements this week from major OEMs saying that they're taking multi-billion-dollar bets on EV. For the future, I see there being more of a need for EV charging, obviously, because of more EVs in the market. What I also see is governments, regulated bodies becoming more warm to this idea. I think we've already made a ton of progress already. I can't think of really a lot that are like completely opposed to EV charging, or EVs in particular. But there are still some hurdles where they make it a little bit more difficult than other jurisdictions may. And so I see that being something as well.
And you've got such an interesting background because you've been on the retail real estate side and now you're on this side. What has that allowed you to do?
Understanding how this industry works and the different things that are important to different people. Like I mentioned earlier with the license agreement, like we're an ancillary use. I know from negotiating leases on the primary use side that takes a ton of time sometimes, right? I don't want to be spending somebody else's time where they could be devoting it to something like that on something that, presumably can get done in a license deal. So I think to nutshell it helps me to speak the language.
Yeah.
It helps me to understand different interests. And, frankly, I mean, I've been in this industry now for a decade. It's a lot of relationships. You know this, right? Like you make those relationships and they don't go away. It doesn't matter which company this person goes to, that person goes to. The relationships stay the same. So that's been very beneficial.
Well, Lane, this has been an awesome conversation. And hopefully before too long, I get to charge up my car at a Hyperfuel station. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me, James. It was a pleasure.
If you like this podcast, do me a favor, go into the app that you're listening to and give us a rating. Or even better, give us a little review, right? Just a sentence about what you like about the show. You can subscribe to Where We Buy on the iPhone podcast app, on Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Or you can always find us on the web at wherewebuy.show. We also post a ton of cool videos and interviews on LinkedIn and YouTube, video tours, interviews with folks that you won't hear on this audio podcast. You can check it out by going to the website everythingweknow.show. If you have a specific question about retail, shopping centers, or retail real estate, you can feel free to connect with me and send me a message on LinkedIn. You can find me by searching for James Cook, JLL. Our theme music is Run in the Night by the Good Lords under Creative Commons license.